ki kista, ni nex, nixokoa. Natusi. Kamox. Spomokan.
Darrell Kipp is one of those men who keep the Blackfeet people's memory alive. He is heir to an epic story in which tragedy, courage, and land have mingled in the struggle for a continent.
Yet, today as I look, you almost can hear the gunshots and hear the people yelling at you and see them running for their lives. And yet, today, very little has ever been said or mentioned about this place.
Barely 100 years ago, the Wild West disappeared and instantly became the most universal myth of modern times. Buffalo Bill and Sitting Bull keep riding through the Great Plains of the West and through our memory. Follow the Jules Verne Adventures team to the west from Wyoming to northern Montana. Go beyond the legend to the reality of a Plains tribe that lives at the base of the backbone of the world. Here is the story of the people who survived devastation at the Marias River, a story of the clash of cultures as told by the Plains Indians themselves. The Buffalo people have returned. They are taking you to their sacred land. Northwestern Montana, the Blackfeet Indian Reservation. Darrell Kipp has taken Jean-Christophe Joffre to a site neglected for over a century. Let's follow them along that meandering and peaceful stream beneath the Marias River's black clay hills. They are traveling back in time to a past so recent that Darrell himself has known some of its protagonists. It's 1870, on the banks of the favorite river of the Blackfeet, to set up winter villages. This is where their peace-loving chief Heavy Runner has chosen to pitch his teepees for the season. Major Eugene M. Baker, with a detachment of the 2nd Cavalry, has been ordered to strike hard at the Blackfeet war leader, Mountain Chief. But the soldiers have failed to find his camp. So in their haste, they attack, by mistake, the village of another chief, Heavy Runner. Ironically, Heavy Runner is one of the few chiefs to have signed a peace treaty with the United States. In Heavy Runner's village, only women, children, and elders have remained.
Heavy Runner takes the paper from General Sully that he had, and he went out and he was waving it at them and telling them that this was the camp of Heavy Runner, who was at peace with the government. Heavy Runner walked from his lodge waving this paper. A shot was fired that killed him. the many acts of heroism and desperation, fear, probably anger, frustration. As the people ran, mothers, children, old men, would run into this river, had ice stacked up against the shores. And they would crawl into this ice and hide. And the soldiers then came through the camp, and they began to tear the camps down and began to kill the people inside. Now, a very conservative record says 173 women and children were massacred that day.
Heavy Runner's 3 children miraculously escaped the massacre. Stricken with remorse and shame, Joe Kipp, one of the regiment's scouts, adopted all 3 children. One of them, Lasken, was Darrell Kipp's grandfather.
One of the reasons I feel comfortable coming here to show people and talk about this site is that I think if people all over would understand some of the events that took place in our tribal history and other tribes' histories throughout North America, they might begin to get a better understanding of Native peoples in this country.
Although it is not as well known as some others, this action is one of the most tragic in a long series of conflicts between the white man and the Indian, caused by the spread of settlement throughout North America. This is what the Jules Verne Adventures team tried to discover.
This complex story is now filled with legends. For a better understanding of the Maris River drama, we must go beyond the myth and listen to the other side. We need to follow the pioneer trails and explore the western frontier, that invisible line which pressed ever forward with both the hunger for land and the sacrifice of the pioneers.
By 1870, the 5 main trails across the West had taken settlers to California and Oregon. The frontier would symbolize the limit between civilization and the wild country. Towns were growing along this sensitive line, outposts on the edge of what was seen as a wilderness haunted by hostile tribes. If we were to listen to just one pioneer's account, we would have to meet the most famous of them all, the man who lived long enough to witness all the developments, all the glory, and all the tragedy of the Old West. A Pony Express rider, an heroic scout, and a faithful friend of the Indians, a man whose bearing and reputation were about to dazzle generations of youngsters thirsting for adventure. He embodied all the legends of the Far West and, above all, the stormy relationship between the Indian and the white man. Barely 300 miles from the Marias River in Wyoming, at the edge of Yellowstone National Park, is a town named after the American Army's most famous scout, William F. Cody, better known as Buffalo Bill. Cody undoubtedly knew the Indians better than almost anyone else of his time.
We met with Paul Fees, historian of the West and curator of the Buffalo Bill Historical Center in Cody, which houses one of the world's finest collections dealing with pioneers and Plains Indians.
There are a couple of things about Buffalo Bill that made him stand out. One is that undefinable thing we call charisma. He was someone that other people always described as handsome, as engaging, as modest. We don't think of that when we think of Buffalo Bill, but we hear other people describe him as modest, and yet somehow magnetic. People were drawn to him. The second thing is, he was absolutely authentic. The things that he showed in his Wild West show or in his stage plays were burlesques of what he had really done. It really wasn't until the 1960s that researchers looked up his real war record in the National Archives and discovered that the things he did were far more dramatic than the things that were portrayed on the stage.
Buffalo Bill became the model for all frontiersmen. In the epic portrayal of how the West was won, his Wild West show was immediately a huge success, especially in the East and in Europe, where people were thrilled by dime novel accounts of adventure in the West. The amazing success of the Wild West show was due not only to its star, but also to the authentic Indian warriors who surrounded him, especially one of them, Sitting Bull, the most famous Indian leader of them all. His name inspired many audiences with terror, but Buffalo Bill regarded him with admiration. Although Sitting Bull's appearance in the show was tinged with tragic irony in view of history, the old scout made his presence a sign of respect and consideration for Plains Indians.
In the time of Buffalo Bill's Wild West, Cody and others thought that the Old West was gone, was past. That was the premise of the Wild West show. The Wild West show showed things that had been, using the real players, of course, using real cowboys and real Indians. But nonetheless, they were portraying a way of life that they said was gone forever. And of course, in a way it was.
In the 19th century, it was widely believed that Indians as a race were inevitably doomed to disappear.
I don't believe Cody believed that, but I do think that he felt that the Indian way of life was a way of life that they should be allowed to preserve on their own terms. In other words, we shouldn't push them into being civilized. We should allow them to retain their customs and to live their lives as they saw fit.
Because his relationship with Indian people was far different from those in charge of Indian affairs, Buffalo Bill never took part in the government's treaty negotiations. His respect for their way of life made him understand that they might be led, but that they could not be forced to adopt the white man's ways.
Cody was quoted several times in interviews as saying that the most important thing to getting along with the Indian was to keep your word. He said that in his judgment, almost all of the problems that occurred with Indian people were problems caused by the American people breaking treaties or encroaching upon treaties. He felt that the government did not do a very good job of protecting the reservations or protecting the treaties, the hunting treaties.
In 1851, the Fort Laramie Treaty imposed borders on Western Indians for the first time in their history. Deprived of the buffalo, the Plains Indians were forced to gather on reservations, where they became totally dependent upon the federal government. No longer able to follow the herds, the Indians organized their lives on the reservations as well as they could, waiting for the rations and supplies promised by the treaties. In 1876, desperately resisting this attempt to chain the Indian people, Sitting Bull assembled 7,000 Dakotas and Cheyennes. Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer was charged with forcing Sitting Bull back to his reservation. Sitting Bull and his people set up a huge summer encampment along the Little Bighorn River. It turned out to be the largest Indian gathering of all time.
The hills above the river have been set aside as a national monument. We met with National Park Service historian John Donner of the Little Bighorn battlefield.
Welcome to Little Bighorn Battlefield National Monument. We're at the site of Custer's last stand and the famous Battle of the Little Bighorn in southeastern Montana in the United States. This is a site where Custer's 7th Cavalry engaged 1,500 to 2,000 Lakota and Cheyenne during the Battle of Little Bighorn.
Though his scouts tried to make him aware of the danger coming from larger opposing forces, Custer turned a deaf ear.
The women and children were out picking wild turnips. The young boys in the village were out tending the horses. Custer's command marched all the way from North Dakota, from Fort Abraham Lincoln, 40 days to get here on horseback to fight here and die in the Little Bighorn Valley.
After the first gunshots, the Indian warriors assembled to face Custer and to resist his attack.
Right now, as we speak, this battle was being fought right here on this hallowed ground here.
Crazy Horse entered the battle and galvanized his warriors into the fight.
Remember the helpless ones, and he took a part in the battle. Hoka-hey, charge, charge. It is a good day to die. And remember the helpless ones. And he rode across the Little Bighorn River. When the warriors started to whittle down the command, they started to retreat back to the top of Last Stand Hill, right up behind me here. And that's where Lieutenant Colonel Custer was found, along with 41 fellow cavalrymen. And they were members of all 5 companies. So survivors of all the 5 companies on the battlefield would rally at that single point for the famous Custer's last stand.
Custer's death shocked the nation. Indians had just defeated the elite of America's modern army.
This is the ultimate clash of cultures and American Western expansion, where we have 2 different dichotomous attitudes of the use of the land, each side fighting for what they thought was right here. The Lakotas and Cheyennes who were encamped in this Little Bighorn Valley floor also would pay the ultimate price too. They lost loved ones, family members in this battle. They won the battle, but they lost the war. This can also be called Sitting Bull's last stand, because the United States Army would renew the campaign with much vigor, and it was the end of an era and an end of the frontier, a last glow of a passing nation.
After years of congressional debate, the official name of Custer Battlefield was recently changed to Little Bighorn Battlefield National Monument.
Later, Sitting Bull was wrongly accused of stirring up unrest on the reservation by encouraging the ghost dance. This was a messianic movement by Indians who hoped and believed that the old ways would return, that their dead would rise again, that the white man would disappear, and that the buffalo would come back by the millions to fill the prairies. The ghost dance was a sign of spiritual desperation, not war, but nervous government officials banned it. General Nelson Miles asked Buffalo Bill to persuade Sitting Bull to come to Standing Rock for talks, but the President of the United States himself ordered Cody recalled from his mission. In 1890, on December 15th, while his friends put up a fierce resistance, Sitting Bull was murdered by Indian police sent to take him from his home.
Cody immediately considered it to be a tragic mistake that never should have happened. Sitting Bull probably would have allowed himself to travel back to the city with Cody and to talk over the problems that were going on. Certainly to dispatch the Indian police when there were rival factions of Indians protecting Sitting Bull was an inflammatory way to go about it, a way that was certain to end in disaster.
As for William Cody, within a generation he had witnessed the extinction of a way of life. His memories had taken refuge in the epic and romantic depiction of an adventure now lost in the new century of machines and commerce. Heroic rides would survive only in westerns and in the innermost reaches of imaginations thirsting for dreams and adventure. This knight of the plains and friend of the Indians died in 1917 on the eve of America's entry into World War I.
Ladies and gentlemen, permit me to introduce to you a Congress of the Rough Riders of the World.
At the vanguard of advancing civilization, boom towns grew quickly to serve not just farmers, but speculators as well. Gold became the object of desire. The government made treaty after treaty, buying or taking lands from the Indians. But prospectors and gold diggers spread everywhere, paying no heed to written agreements. Nevada City, Montana has become the largest surviving ghost town of the West. Quickly abandoned when the gold ran out, it provides a snapshot of life on the mining frontier. In this little town, shops have remained just as they were when their owners left them behind 100 years ago.
John Alixon has been guarding the town for almost 40 years. Nevada City changed his life forever. It is quite difficult to imagine the place without John. Who would believe this is the 21st century as he guides you into the secrets of his ghostly little city?
The gold rush, I suppose, is the biggest thing that happened here. This was the biggest gold strike in, some say, the history of the world for the concentration of the gold. They took out $100 million worth of gold when it was $16 an ounce, and some more when it was $32 an ounce. And so it's $2.5 billion in today's money, approximately, that was removed from Alder Gulch in placer gold, free gold that was simply there supposedly for the taking.
Gold indeed would put a little money in the miners' pockets, but it was a bonanza for the big mining companies. And as for the storekeepers, they made the best profits of all. No sooner was the gold dug out than it wound up in their pockets. They were the first to abandon Nevada City when the gold bubble burst.
Today, John is usually the only customer to haunt the grocer, the barber, or some invisible bartender. Since the prices never changed, John has a very friendly relationship with his pioneer merchants from another world.
Simmering with excitement, Nevada City, like other boom towns, witnessed extremes in both violence and adventure. Cowboys, corrupt sheriffs, stagecoach robbers, gamblers, gunplay, furious nights brightened by honky-tonk pianos in saloons and brothels, the pastimes of hard-living miners. Western movies don't exaggerate the excesses of life in the gold camps.
What is the spirit of pioneers?
Oh, I think the pioneer spirit was mainly a spirit of freedom that brought the people to this country to begin with, and then brought them out to the West where they were free of the laws of the intense society, perhaps. They were free to make their own lives into what they wanted. This spirit of freedom, I think, was what drove the pioneers.
With nothing to keep them, they were also free to leave towns like Nevada City behind and move on. The path of the pioneers was soon to change. The ox-drawn wagon trains that had toiled so painfully across the prairies were about to be replaced by a new kind of train destined to change history. The Indians called it the Iron Horse as it triumphantly appeared on the Great Plains landscape. With its long plumes of black smoke arose the fears of a native people about to encounter more white men than they had imagined the world could carry.
Jack Frost and Bob Bettman drive engines, the seemingly endless trains that snag their way through North America. In Nevada City, they have found a treasure which reminds them of the glorious days of their grandparents.
I guess there's nothing like the smell of steam. There's nothing like the pull of the throttle. It hesitates a minute, and then this engine has a lot of power. It wants to go. The whole operation is different. It isn't an internal combustion engine. This machine is alive. We breathe fire into it. We have to light it. We have to maintain it. We have to take care of it. It's temperamental, and it'll do exactly what we want it to do. If the way we treat it, it treats us back. I think that those people, my great-great-grandfathers, came across here as pioneers. Those people broke the country for us. And to me, this is part of what the history of the country is. It's the history of the West. It's the history of the pioneer period. The steam locomotive built America. If it wasn't for the steam locomotive, America wouldn't be what she is today, no doubt.
The coming of the railroad changed the Plains Indians' lives radically. Their land would no longer be answering the needs of just a few or of those who prospected and moved on. Thousands of men and women were going west. They were coming there to farm, to live, to stay on the land. Contact brought on conflict. To the European Americans, the Indians did not own the land because they did not use it. They were an obstacle to progress. For the settlers, war was the only way to defeat this obstacle. For the Indians, a desperate struggle began to save a way of life based on the buffalo and the freedom to walk upon the land of their ancestors. Kill as many buffalo as you wish. Every dead buffalo is a dead Indian. The buffalo gave the Plains Indians all that land could provide: food, clothing, tools, even teepees. And it took on great meaning in their spiritual lives. The army understood this clearly and saw a strategic advantage in the decline of huge buffalo herds. Where the buffalo vanished, Indians vanished as well. In the middle of the 19th century, there may have been as many as 60 million buffalo in North America. By 1880, there were only a few hundred left. Only one of the ghost dance dreams came true, in part: the return of the buffalo. National parks and private ranchers have nurtured this symbol of the Old West. From the few survivors, there are now thousands.
Barely saved from extinction, North America's biggest mammals were not doomed to die out. Today, the large number of calves in herds proves the resilience of the species. Northwestern Montana, 2 hours from the Canadian border. We are traveling through the past, the present, and the future of the Plains Indians.
The Blackfeet Confederation consists of almost 30,000 people. 11,000 live on the Montana Reservation. The others live in Canada or are scattered elsewhere throughout the country. The reservation encompasses almost 2 million acres. It's one of the largest in the United States.
Our arrival in Browning, capital of the Blackfeet Reservation, is an intense moment. As if we were entering a book in which all our imaginary heroes could take shape and tell their stories in their own voices. This summer week in Browning is very special. These are the Indian Days of North America, the days of the great annual powwow, which draws about 8,000 members of all the Plains tribes invited by the Blackfeet. The Plains Indians are survivors who reveal to us a truly complex picture of America. A picture that most of the time is visible only in the shadow and light. Fixed in time by Curtis's photographs or John Ford's Technicolor, the images from our memory now face a new dimension, the most powerful one, the dimension of life and reality, the present.
My name is Johnny, Tail Feather, Blackfeet.
Okay.
Blackfeet Reservation here.
Now, after all, we are entering a sacred land.
See, and the other thing, there's not a Blackfeet on the language.
In 1985, after traveling throughout North America to study Native American languages, Darrell Kipp returned home to Browning to establish the very first schools to teach Blackfeet children their own language, a language that had almost died out.
We're used to looking at the pictures of the Indian or going to the museum to see the Indian, or we hear to see through native eyes. So we talk about the Native American like we talk about a photograph, or we talk about an artifact, or we talk about something that's static. So we tend to want to talk about seeing them. Let's go see the Indians. But as you know, equally important is to hear them. And the sounds of Native America and the sounds of our language are something to behold.
The Young Gray Horse Society was founded 40 years ago by some traditional Blackfeet artists. Now young people from 14 to 20 are able to take over and perform the traditional songs. In Browning and all over the West, their powerful voices echo as a rallying cry for the revival of old values. All of them live on the reservation. The Great Powwow gives them an opportunity to demonstrate their generation's vitality.
You always hear people say, save the redwood, save the whale, save the darter snail, save the spotted owl. And those are all good. We should save all living things. But it never occurs to anybody that a tribal language is living and deserves to be saved. And I use this analogy. If we think of our tribal languages as our grandparents, and we think of them sitting alongside the road, and we're coming along, and if we were to pass them by and refuse to help them, then we would be truly brutal people. So it isn't a matter of why do you save your language. The question is, you must save your language because they are your grandparents.
You're going to be on the rodeo? You're going to do the rodeo? Yeah.
I was thinking about it. I don't get $100
The grand entry kicks off every powwow, and the elders enter first. But not just any elders. These are Indian veterans who fought during World War II or in Korea or Vietnam. Thousands of them proudly wore the U.S. Army uniform in defending America's colors. Paradoxical? Not at all. For Native Americans, this country was theirs before it was anyone else's. They defended their homeland according to the war traditions of their ancestors.
George Kip, another Maris River child, modestly leaves off his farming. His past links him to the activism of Red Power and the American Indian movement. In the 70s, this movement finally called the world's attention to the dire living conditions of North America's native peoples.
We are needing our land back. Our land that we have here was not given to us. This land we owned. This is what we were able to keep through blood, sweat, and tears, through the almost annihilation of our people. We kept this one spot on earth for our tribe and for ourselves. And for the last 100 years, we've been passively, without resistance. This is where I want my children, my grandchildren, great-great-great-great-grandchildren to exist. And I'm not going to passively give that up no more. I'm not going to allow people to move on to my reservation and just take our land, because my ancestors, our blood was spilt for this land to retain it. Their bodies are buried here. This is our country. This is what we own. This is what our ancestors died for, and we're not going to passively relinquish it to nobody. One of the reasons I wanted to invite you over and take a look at this beaver pond and the trees and the hills and rocks and all the things that's here, it has a great representation to us Blackfeet people. It also gave us a governing way of life and secured a lot of our history.
Considering all the causes of mortality among Plains Indians, soldiers had eventually become a lesser evil. Diseases brought by the white man and the loss of the buffalo were decisive factors in the disappearance of the Indian people from much of their land. Those who managed to survive these disasters were doomed to a more definitive death, a spiritual death caused by the systematic destruction of their culture and their way of life. George Kipp and Jean-Christophe Joffre are heading to the Christian mission established on the reservation in 1890.
The education process was very, very extreme and very cruel. The children would be forcibly taken out of their homes and brought here. Their hair were cut, they were taken off their buckskins, because our people in those days still lived in a teepee. They were just coming out of the nomadic type of life, and none of them could talk English. And as young children, they were forced to. They was never allowed to talk Indian in this area here. If they were punished, and the punishment they had was very, very cruel. There was related to physical abuse of, it would be a crime nowadays to what these children had to go through. There was stories of that graveyard away up there where there's a couple young children up there that were actually killed here. I talked to many elders about the ones that went to school here. My father-in-law is one of them. And their memories are not very great of that life. It was a shocking lifestyle and change for them. When coming from a home where there's nothing but love and kindness and respect into a Western setting of religion where there's nothing but cruelty and mandates and abuse. And these children, they grew up in that environment, and it changed out our way of life. The civilization that preceded it could have been provided to us in a more easy manner, more meaningful, but this is what we was forced under.
Between 1883 and 1884, with the people completely dependent on the government, starvation broke out in this once abundant land.
The starvation winter, it was a very devastating time to our people. It was just one of the last incidents in our history that was people do not like to talk about or remember. We don't often know if it was planned or if it happened that way, but the political structure and the actual appropriations to buy us our rations and so forth never reached us. And it started in 1880, and then it kind of come to a severe head in the winter of 1883, 84. And we had nothing to eat at all by then, totally. But it was ironic because 12 miles over that way there was herds of cattle that were owned by non-Indians. But if we went out and butchered a cow, they would come in and they'd kill us and hang us. They figure close to, just in this area, this one little area out in here, that there was 800 out on them flats that spring. And they couldn't dig graves, too weak to dig graves, put them right on the ground. And they just lay them out there all over this ridge. They call it Ghost Ridge. And there was only about 1,600 of us Blackfeet left after that starvation winter.
What happened to the bodies?
The bodies just laid there. And then the government, they start collecting the human remains, and there was correspondence that we discovered where the agents and the different government officials here would go out there in the evenings and they'd start piling these bones and put them in boxes and ship them back to the Smithsonian Institute, and they would keep them and study them. They was trying to. One of their studies was they was trying to judge the thickness of our skulls. They'd take an Indian skull and pour sand in it and stuff like that. Anyway, they ended up with about 50,000 human remains in the Smithsonian
And a lot of the 800 that was buried around here went out there too. So it was, so there was a very devastating period.
So I believe it will change. A day is coming when it will change and they'll say, hey, you know, we did a great injustice to the American Indian and we're going to rectify it.
Cynthia is one of the reservation activists who campaign for government recognition of Blackfeet's rights, notably their rights in Glacier National Park. By having several sites of the park renamed with their original Blackfeet names, Cynthia Kipp has won an important and symbolic victory in her tribe's struggle for the restoration of their age-old sacred lands.
I believe we have an excellent future with our younger people getting a good, sound, quality education. I feel that here, that the Blackfeet, we are finally getting something that has been in American cities for years. What do you see out here? You see we're getting oiled roads. We're getting curbs and gutters and sidewalks. And this is the year 2000. Other cities across America have had them for over 100 years. We're finally getting them. We're getting street lights. We've finally got running water here in this town of Browning after the flood occurred of 1964. No one had water. So we have been deprived, but we have lived and still managed to be happy and to be healthy and to be friendly. It's good to be alive and well and happy and healthy in America, on the Blackfeet Indian Reservation. Wouldn't live anywhere. We have the beautiful mountains, and of course it's cold in the wintertime, and it gets a little below zero, but we tolerate it, and this is my land, and this is where I grew up, and I love it very much.
Joe Kipp, Darrell's cousin, is one of Chief Heavy Runner's direct descendants. 10 years ago, he and some of his people opened the first independent Blackfeet bank on the reservation to help save their economy from collapse. I asked Joe if the relative freedom now visible on the reservation might someday lead to the return of Blackfeet sovereignty over the land.
I'm going to speak about the Great Plains area. This part of Montana, Wyoming, South and North Dakota. In this arid climate, this was Blackfeet country, Gros Ventre country, Assiniboine country, Lakota country, Cheyenne country. This whole great area. The area was homesteaded by pioneers about 120 years ago. The Indians were put on reservations. The farming is, most of these people came from the Ukraine area, and they were farmers from that country. And they were given a lot of free farmland to, the land was taken from the Indians and given to them, and they farmed it for many years. The problem is that the land is not, the land is productive, but there's not enough water out here. There's not enough rainfall. So for the past 55 years, the federal government has been subsidizing these farms, giving them money to grow the crops. Okay, but their population base has been shrinking considerably. The towns are getting smaller. The kids that come off those farms are moving away to the city because they can't make a living on the land. So their population is shrinking dramatically. There's only one people on the Great Plains that are thriving. That's Indian people. I'm very confident in the next 100 years that we're going to have this area, we're going to control this area with our vote, if nothing else. will be the dominant population of the Great Plains. And the reason is that we don't try to change the environment.
There is a mountain that looms larger than any other landmark for the Blackfeet people, Chief Mountain. This sacred mountain overlooks the backbone of the world at the heart of Glacier Park.
We invited Joe Kip to come and see the sacred mountain with us from the same vantage point as that of Napi, the Creator, when he made the world from the sky.
So all of our water comes from there. The water is life. It gives us life. Napi's our creator. He made that part of the world special. He made it very, very beautiful. And he left life there for the people. For people such as you and I and all the Blackfeet people to go up there and to get life just from being there, to get the energy of being alive.
Cynthia, George, Darrell, Joe, and all the Maris River children are entering a new millennium in America. Heirs to history, they are also guardians of the Indian dream, the oldest human dream, the one of the eternal soul.
Today, all of the world's people might look down at the Marias River's peaceful waters and find in its reflection the destiny of all those who keep on fighting for the best reason to live: freedom.